She suggested we keep things open for now during what I thought was our romantic dinner celebration. I'd been planning this evening at Morton's downtown Nashville for weeks, thinking we'd finally talk about moving in together after 2 years of dating. I'd even made reservations at the best table overlooking the city lights, the same spot where we'd shared our first real conversation about the future back when she seemed genuinely interested in what I was building. Instead, Melody sat across from me in that emerald dress I'd complimented a dozen times, casually destroying our relationship between bites of her barely touched $140 filet mignon. I should have seen it coming when she'd spent the entire appetizer course checking her phone and smiling at messages she wouldn't explain, her manicured fingers dancing across the screen with an energy she never showed when texting me back. She told me she needed to explore her options and focus on personal growth while keeping me as her emotional anchor, whatever that was supposed to mean in practical terms when she was already emotionally checked out. I watched her green eyes avoid mine as she explained that she'd been thinking about this for weeks and had already started conversations with several guys from her CrossFit gym, guys who apparently understood her need for adventure and spontaneity in ways I never could with my stable income and reliable presence. The way she said it, so matter-of-fact and rehearsed, like she was discussing weekend plans instead of dismantling everything we'd built together over 24 months of shared experiences and future planning. She mentioned how relationships needed room to breathe and how we'd grown into different people who wanted different things from life, but she still valued what we had and didn't want to lose our connection entirely because I provided something important that these other guys couldn't. My custom furniture business had been growing steadily, landing 3 major contracts in the past month alone, including a complete dining room set for a celebrity's Nashville mansion, and I'd been looking forward to sharing my success with someone who supposedly cared about my dreams and ambitions. Instead, I found myself sitting across from a stranger who'd apparently been auditioning my replacement while I'd been crafting her Christmas present in my workshop, a delicate jewelry box made from Tennessee walnut with her initials carved into the top in an intricate design that had taken me weeks to perfect. I set down my fork and looked at her directly for what felt like the first time all evening, really studying her face as she waited for my response with that expectant expression she got when she wanted something expensive or emotionally complicated. I told her very calmly that our relationship was now officially closed, permanently, and signaled the waiter for the check while she continued explaining why this arrangement would benefit both of us and help us grow as individuals. The stunned expression on her face almost made me laugh out loud. She'd clearly expected me to beg or negotiate or promise to change somehow to accommodate her need for backup security while she explored greener pastures. Instead, I paid the $180 bill without another word, left a generous tip for our waiter who'd witnessed the entire uncomfortable exchange and looked sympathetic, stood up, and walked out while she sat there with her mouth open like she was catching flies in the expensive restaurant air. I drove straight home to my studio apartment above my woodworking shop, pulled out my phone, and methodically blocked her number on everything I could think of: social media, messaging apps, email, even Venmo, where she'd been requesting money for various emergencies over the past few months that always seemed to coincide with new designer purchases. Then I spent the rest of the night boxing up her scattered belongings that had slowly invaded my carefully organized space over months of gradual infiltration, the makeup cluttering my bathroom counter, the designer clothes hanging in my closet that cost more than some of my power tools, the expensive coffee she'd insisted I keep stocked even though I preferred my simple black brew that didn't require special equipment or monthly subscriptions. Each item I packed reminded me of how much physical and mental space she'd taken up in my life without contributing anything meaningful or lasting in return, just expensive clutter and constant demands for attention and validation that never seemed satisfied no matter what I provided. By sunrise, I had 3 neat boxes sitting by my door and a strange sense of relief settling over me that I hadn't expected to feel, like I'd finally cleared sawdust from a finished piece and could see the wood grain clearly for the first time in months. I was organizing the last of Melody's belongings when someone knocked on my workshop door the next afternoon, and I was surprised to find Ivy standing there looking genuinely apologetic and slightly nervous about the uncomfortable situation we all found ourselves in. Melody's best friend since college was a 29-year-old pediatric physical therapist with warm brown eyes and an honest face that made her seem trustworthy in a way that Melody never quite managed despite all her surface charm and practiced social media smiles. Ivy explained that Melody was too emotional to face me herself after what happened at the restaurant and had been crying on her couch since yesterday, so she'd volunteered to collect the boxes and handle the awkward exchange that nobody really wanted to navigate in the aftermath of such a messy breakup. I invited her inside for coffee while she looked around my workshop space with genuine curiosity and obvious appreciation, taking in the half-finished dining table I'd been crafting from reclaimed barn wood and the collection of hand tools that represented years of careful investment in my trade and passion for creating something beautiful and lasting. She apologized profusely for Melody's behavior and admitted that she tried to talk her out of the open relationship idea weeks ago when Melody first brought it up during one of their regular coffee dates. But her friend had been convinced that I'd accept the arrangement rather than lose her completely because I was supposedly too comfortable and predictable to walk away. As we talked over steaming mugs of my simple black coffee in mismatched ceramic cups I'd turned on my lathe during slow weekends, Ivy revealed that she'd been questioning her own marriage to Marcus, a workaholic pharmaceutical sales rep who treated her more like a roommate than a wife and hadn't touched her in months beyond perfunctory kisses goodbye when he left for his endless business trips and conference calls. The conversation stretched into hours as we discovered a deep connection through our shared appreciation for craftsmanship and creativity that neither of us had expected to find in such an awkward circumstance. She was fascinated by my custom furniture pieces and the problem-solving aspects of woodworking, while I found myself captivated by her innovative therapy techniques for children with mobility challenges and her passion for helping kids achieve independence. She described how she modified traditional exercises and created custom equipment to help kids achieve movement goals that conventional therapy couldn't address, working with local craftsmen to build specialized tools and adaptive devices, and I realized she was solving physical puzzles the same way I approached difficult joinery problems in my furniture designs. The chemistry between us was undeniable and completely unexpected, something neither of us had been looking for but both felt guilty about given the circumstances of Melody's recent dramatic exit from my life and Ivy's complicated marriage situation that she was only beginning to acknowledge. Ivy mentioned that she'd always admired the handcrafted wooden toys I'd made for her nephew's birthday last year, intricate pieces that Melody had dismissed as unnecessary and time-consuming when store-bought plastic versions cost a fraction of the effort and would be forgotten just as quickly by a child who didn't understand craftsmanship. She studied the grain patterns in my latest project with the same appreciation I brought to fine woodworking, running her fingers along the smooth surfaces and asking intelligent questions about wood selection, joinery techniques, and finishing processes that showed she understood the difference between mass-produced furniture and something made with care, intention, and respect for the material. When she finally gathered the boxes to leave as the afternoon light faded through my workshop windows, we both lingered at the door longer than necessary, neither wanting to end a conversation that felt more natural and engaging than anything I'd experienced with Melody in months of trying to force connection where none really existed beneath the surface attraction. I watched her carefully load the boxes into her Honda Civic with the same gentle precision she probably used with her young patients, noting how she treated even Melody's scattered belongings with more respect than Melody had ever shown my workspace or my tools, and I found myself hoping she'd have a legitimate reason to come back soon even though I knew that was probably inappropriate given the timing of everything that had happened and her complicated personal situation. Within a week, Melody launched a social media campaign that would have been embarrassing if it weren't so predictably desperate and transparent to anyone who actually knew the real story of what had happened between us. She started posting cryptic Instagram stories about controlling partners and toxic masculinity while painting herself as a liberated woman who'd finally escaped an emotionally abusive situation, complete with carefully staged photos of herself looking contemplative and strong while sipping expensive lattes at trendy Nashville coffee shops. I watched her carefully crafted narrative unfold through mutual friends who forwarded me screenshots with a mixture of amusement and disbelief, each post more dramatic and self-serving than the last about men who couldn't handle a modern woman's independence and growth mindset, accompanied by inspirational quotes about knowing your worth and leaving people who don't support your journey toward authenticity. She posted photos of herself at expensive restaurants with different guys from her CrossFit gym, each caption more pointed than the last about finally being with real men who understood adventure and spontaneity instead of boring routine, but the desperation in her forced smiles was visible even through the heavy Instagram filters she used to hide her increasingly hollow and stressed appearance. However, several mutual friends who had witnessed the restaurant scene firsthand began sharing their own stories about Melody's manipulative behavior over the years, including her well-established pattern of monkey branching between relationships and always keeping backup options while systematically draining her current boyfriend financially and emotionally before moving on to someone with better prospects or more exciting potential. Meanwhile, I had started meeting with Ivy at my workshop twice a week under the professional pretense of designing therapeutic furniture for children with disabilities, a collaborative project that began as legitimate business but quickly became the highlight of both our weeks as we discovered how naturally our different skills and perspectives complemented each other in ways that felt both productive and deeply personal. She would arrive promptly at 7 in the evening with detailed specifications and medical requirements for mobility aids and adaptive equipment that her young patients desperately needed, while I would transform her clinical vision into beautifully crafted pieces that were both highly functional and dignified, treating these vulnerable kids with the same respect and attention to detail I brought to my high-end custom furniture rather than accepting the ugly institutional solutions they usually had to settle for. Our stolen hours working together in my shop felt more intimate and meaningful than entire weekends I'd spent with Melody trying to find common ground that simply didn't exist beneath our surface physical attraction and her constant need for expensive entertainment and social media validation. Ivy would watch me work with genuine fascination and respect, asking thoughtful questions about wood selection and joinery techniques while sharing heartbreaking and inspiring stories about her patients and their families. And I found myself looking forward to these collaborative sessions with an anticipation and excitement I'd never felt during my relationship with someone who only cared about the financial and social benefits of dating a successful craftsman. The chemistry between us grew stronger and more undeniable with each meeting, but we both maintained careful professional boundaries given her complicated marriage situation and the recent messy drama with Melody that still felt too fresh and inappropriate to ignore. Though I couldn't help noticing how she started staying later with each visit and how our conversations gradually drifted from work topics to more personal territory about dreams and disappointments and what we actually wanted from life beyond the suffocating expectations other people had placed on us without our permission. Marcus became suspicious of Ivy's new hobby when she started coming home energized and excited in ways he hadn't seen in years, so he decided to follow her one evening and discovered us working together in my shop on what was clearly legitimate therapeutic furniture that could revolutionize pediatric physical therapy approaches across the entire medical community. Instead of the angry confrontation I expected when he walked through my workshop door unannounced, Marcus looked around at the adaptive equipment we designed and built with obvious surprise and what seemed like genuine interest, then turned to both of us with an expression that seemed more relieved than upset about finding his wife with another man in what could have been a compromising situation. He admitted that he'd been having an affair with his district manager Jennifer for the past 6 months and had been looking for an excuse to end their marriage without being the obvious villain in their social circle. So discovering Ivy's emotional connection with someone else actually solved his problem rather than creating a new dramatic complication that would require lawyers and family intervention. Marcus explained that he'd fallen out of love with Ivy years ago but had been too comfortable and too much of a coward to address their fundamental incompatibility, preferring to lose himself in demanding work schedules and meaningless flings with colleagues rather than face the uncomfortable reality that they'd grown into completely different people who wanted different things from life and relationships. The conversation that followed was surprisingly civilized and mature, with all three of us acknowledging that sometimes good people grow apart despite their best intentions and genuine efforts, and that staying in a loveless marriage out of social obligation helps nobody involved while preventing everyone from finding genuine happiness with someone more compatible and appreciative. Within 2 weeks, Ivy and Marcus had agreed to an amicable divorce with no unnecessary drama or bitter fighting, splitting their modest assets fairly and agreeing that they'd both be significantly better off pursuing relationships with people who actually appreciated what they had to offer rather than settling for comfortable mediocrity and emotional distance. However, Melody discovered our developing relationship through a mutual friend's social media post showing Ivy and me working together on a specialized children's wheelchair that had been featured in a local newspaper article about innovative therapy equipment being developed by Nashville artisans, and she completely lost whatever composure and dignity she'd been maintaining since our breakup at the restaurant. She showed up uninvited at Ivy's family barbecue that weekend, demanding that everyone choose sides between her and Ivy, accusing her former best friend of stealing her backup plan and destroying their lifelong friendship for a man who wasn't even worth the effort, drama, or social complications that would inevitably follow. Ivy's parents, who had never particularly liked Melody's self-centered behavior and constant need for attention and validation from everyone around her, publicly supported their daughter's decision to leave her loveless marriage and pursue genuine happiness with someone who clearly valued her intelligence, creativity, and professional contributions to helping vulnerable children. The family gathering became an impromptu intervention where multiple relatives shared stories about Melody's manipulative behavior over the years and how relieved they were to see Ivy finally standing up for herself and choosing her own path rather than enabling her friends' toxic patterns of behavior and emotional manipulation that had damaged several relationships. Melody's attempt at legal intimidation backfired spectacularly when she threatened to sue me for emotional distress and claimed half ownership of furniture pieces she insisted she had inspired during our relationship, despite never contributing anything more substantial than Instagram posts and occasional complaints about my messy workshop that interfered with her social media aesthetic. Her frivolous lawsuit became even more ridiculous when my attorney presented comprehensive documentation showing that she had actively discouraged my custom work throughout our relationship, constantly pressuring me to abandon woodworking and take what she called a real job in corporate sales that would fund her expensive lifestyle and social media aspirations without requiring her to work harder or develop any actual professional skills herself. The legal papers she filed were so poorly researched and obviously vindictive that her own lawyers seemed embarrassed during our first meeting, especially when I produced text messages and emails where she had mocked my therapeutic furniture project and called it a waste of time that would never make real money like a proper business with consistent income and growth potential. However, her desperate legal drama inadvertently brought positive attention to my collaborative work with Ivy, leading to substantial contracts with children's hospitals and special needs schools across Tennessee who had heard about our innovative approach through the court filings that became public record and were picked up by local media outlets interested in the human interest angle. The irony was perfect and almost poetic. Melody's attempt to damage my business actually expanded it beyond anything I had imagined possible, with medical professionals and administrators recognizing the genuine value of combining high-quality craftsmanship with therapeutic functionality rather than settling for the ugly institutional furniture that most facilities accepted as inevitable due to budget constraints and lack of alternatives. Meanwhile, Melody faced serious professional consequences when her employer discovered she had been using company time and resources for her social media vendetta against me, including posting defamatory content during work hours and using her marketing position to try damaging my business reputation through fake reviews and negative online campaigns that violated several employment policies. The marketing firm that employed her had a strict social media policy that she had clearly violated multiple times, and they terminated her employment after conducting an internal investigation that revealed months of inappropriate behavior and systematic misuse of company resources for personal disputes rather than focusing on client work and professional responsibilities. Her dramatic downfall accelerated rapidly when several of her CrossFit gym admirers discovered her real personality once she started demanding expensive gifts and financial support from them, with each potential replacement quickly realizing that dating her meant becoming her personal ATM rather than building an equal partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. I watched this unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and genuine pity, knowing that she had created every bit of her own misery through choices that prioritized short-term excitement and material validation over building something meaningful and lasting with someone who actually cared about her well-being and personal growth. By the time our legal dispute was dismissed with prejudice and she was ordered to pay my attorney fees as punishment for filing a frivolous lawsuit, Ivy and I had established our therapeutic furniture line as a legitimate business that was changing children's lives while generating sustainable income from work that felt purposeful rather than just profitable, proving that passion combined with skill could create something valuable that helped vulnerable people while building a successful enterprise. 6 months later, Ivy's divorce was finalized and I threw her what we jokingly called a divorce party at my expanded workshop showroom, celebrating her freedom with close friends and family who had watched her bloom since leaving her stagnant marriage and discovering what it felt like to be truly appreciated for her intelligence and professional contributions. The party was held on a perfect Saturday evening after I'd spent all day rearranging my workspace to showcase our therapeutic furniture collection, which had grown to include specialized wheelchairs, adaptive desks, sensory therapy tools, and mobility aids that were revolutionizing how medical facilities approached pediatric care with dignity and style rather than accepting the institutional sterility that had been the norm for decades. Ivy looked absolutely radiant in a simple blue dress that complemented her warm eyes and highlighted the confidence that had emerged since she'd stopped trying to make her marriage work with someone who didn't value her passion for helping children achieve independence through innovative therapy techniques. She moved through the space with natural grace, explaining our design process to interested guests and potential clients who had heard about our innovative approach through word of mouth, medical conferences, and positive media coverage that emphasized both the functional benefits and aesthetic beauty of our work. The celebration showcased our therapeutic furniture line, now officially called Ivy's Innovations, in honor of her crucial contributions to the design process and her clinical expertise that transformed my woodworking skills into something that genuinely improved vulnerable children's lives in measurable and meaningful ways that went far beyond simple functionality. Local news covered the unique combination of craftsmanship and pediatric therapy, interviewing both of us about how we developed this specialized niche that was attracting attention from medical professionals across the Southeast who were tired of settling for ugly, impersonal equipment that treated children like medical cases rather than human beings deserving beauty, dignity, and equipment designed specifically for their needs and comfort. The evening was absolutely perfect until Melody made her predictable dramatic entrance with someone she introduced loudly as her new boyfriend, though I immediately recognized him as a paid actor from a local theater group that I'd seen in community productions around Nashville, making her desperate charade even more pathetic and transparent than her previous attempts at creating drama. She swept into the party wearing an obviously expensive dress that she clearly couldn't afford on her current income, accompanied by this visibly uncomfortable young man who kept checking his watch and looking around the room like he was calculating how quickly he could complete whatever performance he'd been hired for and escape back to his normal life. Melody's attempt to upstage the celebration and make herself the center of attention fell completely flat when everyone simply ignored her dramatic entrance and continued celebrating Ivy's new life and our business success, treating her desperate bid for relevance like the sad theater performance it obviously was rather than the shocking disruption she'd intended to create. I watched with genuine amusement as her fake boyfriend slowly realized what kind of awkward situation he'd been hired for and began subtly distancing himself from her increasingly frantic attempts to create a scene worthy of her social media followers and her need to prove that she was thriving without me. The evening concluded perfectly with me proposing to Ivy right there in the workshop surrounded by the custom furniture pieces we'd designed together, pulling out a ring I'd been carrying for weeks while waiting for the perfect moment that would symbolize our collaborative partnership in both love and meaningful work that was making a real difference in children's lives. Ivy's immediate and joyful yes was followed by enthusiastic applause from our guests who had been rooting for our happiness since watching us work together with such natural harmony and shared purpose, creating something beautiful and functional that went beyond typical furniture to become therapeutic tools that helped vulnerable kids achieve goals their families had never thought possible. Meanwhile, Melody stood forgotten in the corner with her hired escort already calling an Uber to escape the increasingly awkward situation where nobody was paying attention to her performance and everyone was focused on celebrating genuine love and professional success built on mutual respect and shared values. 2 years later, I was running a thriving therapeutic furniture company with Ivy that had expanded nationwide, with her physical therapy expertise and my masterful craftsmanship creating revolutionary products for children with disabilities that were changing how the medical community approached pediatric care across multiple states and medical networks. Our wedding day arrived at a converted warehouse venue that we had filled entirely with our custom furniture pieces, each one representing a child whose life we'd improved and a family we'd helped achieve mobility goals they never thought possible through beautiful, dignified equipment that treated young patients as human beings deserving respect rather than medical cases requiring institutional solutions. The venue looked absolutely stunning with warm Edison bulb lighting reflecting off the polished wood surfaces of adaptive wheelchairs, sensory therapy tables, standing frames, and mobility aids that guests could interact with and understand, creating an atmosphere that celebrated both our love and our shared mission to help vulnerable children achieve independence through innovative design and therapeutic functionality. Many of our wedding guests were therapists, doctors, and parents whose children had benefited directly from our collaborative work, creating a celebration that felt deeply meaningful and purposeful rather than just a typical wedding focused solely on romance and social expectations without considering the broader impact of what we'd built together. The ceremony itself was conducted by Dr. Sarah Martinez, a pediatric physician whose 8-year-old daughter Emma had cerebral palsy and used one of our custom adaptive desks that had transformed her ability to participate in regular classroom activities alongside her peers, making our vows feel like a natural continuation of the work we'd been doing together rather than a separate life event disconnected from our professional mission. Just as we were exchanging rings in front of friends and family who had watched our relationship develop through shared purpose and mutual respect for each other's expertise, Melody made one final desperate and dramatic attempt to disrupt our happiness by bursting through the venue doors with what could only be described as a completely unhinged declaration. She announced loudly to the entire wedding party that I had stolen her business ideas and demanded immediate financial compensation for what she claimed were her intellectual contributions to our therapeutic furniture line, insisting that casual conversations we'd had during our relationship about helping disabled children had somehow given her legal ownership rights to our innovations and commercial success. Instead of ruining the moment as she'd clearly intended with her theatrical entrance and dramatic timing, her completely delusional outburst became the final proof to everyone present of her total detachment from reality and her pathological inability to accept that other people could build something meaningful and successful without her involvement, permission, or imaginary contributions. The wedding guests, many of whom were medical professionals with advanced degrees and parents who understood exactly how difficult, specialized, and technically demanding our work actually was, looked at Melody with a mixture of genuine pity and complete disbelief as she ranted about stolen opportunities while obviously having no understanding whatsoever of pediatric therapy principles, adaptive equipment design requirements, or the years of intensive research and development that had gone into creating our medically approved products. Her claims were so utterly absurd and obviously fabricated that several people started quietly laughing, not at the disruption she was causing to our ceremony, but at the sheer audacity and delusion of someone with no medical training, no woodworking skills, no understanding of disability needs, and no knowledge of therapeutic principles trying to claim credit for innovations that required specialized expertise she clearly didn't possess. Ivy and I exchanged amused glances rather than feeling upset or threatened by this pathetic display, both of us recognizing this final tantrum as exactly what it was, the last desperate gasp of someone who simply couldn't accept that her former boyfriend had found genuine happiness and remarkable professional success with someone who actually valued his talents and shared his commitment to helping vulnerable children achieve their potential. The ceremony continued without missing a beat as venue security quietly but firmly escorted Melody out while she continued her increasingly unhinged rants about stolen opportunities and unrecognized contributions, her voice gradually fading into complete irrelevance as we completed our heartfelt vows surrounded by people who understood and genuinely appreciated the real work we were doing together to improve children's lives. Our kiss as newly married partners was accompanied by enthusiastic applause from guests who were celebrating not just our romantic union, but the professional partnership that had created something beautiful, functional, and genuinely impactful that was making a measurable difference in the lives of children with disabilities across the country, proving definitively that when two people with complementary skills and shared values work together toward a meaningful goal, they can build something far greater and more lasting than either could achieve alone in their separate pursuits.